For the hypophyseal portal system, you are going to need black, blue, red, and green, or 4 different colors. Red and blue are probably important here. All right, so the first structure we're going to draw is just a kind of the inferior most part of the diencephalon, which is called the hypothalamus. It's got that little W shape that is very distinctive. From there, you're going to draw a stalk. And then at the bottom, you're going to draw this pituitary gland. We're going to be specifically saying that there are 2 different parts to the pituitary gland, and the posterior part of this is called the posterior pituitary lobe. It is not, in fact, glandular tissue, therefore, it's not actually called the posterior pituitary gland. It's called the posterior pituitary lobe, and it's also called the neurohypophysis. The part that we're really going to be paying attention today is the anterior pituitary gland, which is also called the adenohypophysis or the adenohypophysis. The stalk, you may recall from brain anatomy, is called the infundibulum. Now that we have the main players shown, we're going to start drawing some blood vessels here. And so we're going to start off with red. It's pretty important that you use red and blue when you're drawing blood vessels. So what you do is you sort of draw a blood vessel coming in. This is going to be the superior hypophyseal artery. Superior hypophyseal artery. I would recommend repeating these things out loud, by the way. And then you're going to sort of draw spider legs from one side to the other. And with the blue marker, you're going to draw spider legs that meet the red spider legs and come back. And you're kind of drawing like a circle, red on the one side and blue on the other. It's a little network in there. This is actually the first capillary bed that you're drawing, the first of many that you'll be drawing this semester. This is called, this particular capillary bed is special. It's called the primary capillary plexus. The one with the degree signal there means primary. The word plexus means crisscrossing or interweaving of something. Next, we're going to take our blue marker and we're going to go ahead and draw, it's usually portrayed as 2 tubes, but there may be one, there may be more than that. 2 tubes kind of bifurcating from that point, leading down into the anterior pituitary gland, where you'll see that it makes another, basically, capillary bed, although this one is entirely blue. It may not surprise you to know that this capillary bed is called the secondary capillary plexus. The hypothalamus has many different purposes, and one of them is to create these neuropeptides. Neuropeptides are not exactly the same thing as neurotransmitters. They're not exactly the same thing as hormones. Sometimes it's hard to classify things. So we have these neuropeptides, which we'll be coming back to that concept in a little bit. The release of these neuropeptides from the hypothalamus into the bloodstream at the primary capillary plexus. And then those neuropeptides that have been released from the hypothalamus and gone through this blood vessel system will now interact with this network of blood vessels in the anterior pituitary gland. And as a result, these neuropeptides that originally came from the hypothalamus are going to cause the release of many different hormones, which we're portraying in green today. Now, when hormones are released by a gland, of course, you know this by now, it's important that they enter into the blood supply. So we draw a vein that comes from the anterior pituitary gland and will be a blood supply. It will be entering into the blood supply that will then proceed to be sent to the rest of the body. By and large, these hormones that are released from the anterior pituitary gland are going to be your tropic hormones. By and large, they're pretty much all tropic hormones. They're maintenance hormones. They're responsible for the release of other hormones, by and large. It's also important to name these 2 little guys here. These are special veins. They're called the hypophyseal portal veins. They are one of only 2 portal systems in the body. Portal veins are a little odd because normally what veins do, as you see at the bottom of the page, is they simply send blood into the general circulation of the body. What portal veins do is they take blood from one capillary and bring it into another capillary. And I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is an unusual situation. The other portal system that we know of is the hepatic portal system. All right, we went ahead and used our green marker to label our hormones. And now we're going to move up to the top of the page, and we're going to go ahead and list out 6 neuropeptides that are released by the hypothalamus. Just getting into some specifics here. GHRH, GHIH, TRH, CRH, GnRH, and PIH. We are also going to go ahead and label 6 hormones that are released from the anterior pituitary gland. GH, TSH, ACTH, FSH, LH, and PRL. So we're going to go ahead and connect individual neuropeptides with the hormones that they release. So each of these neuropeptides, coming originally from the hypothalamus, are going to interact in the anterior pituitary gland, and each of them is individually going to cause the release of specific ones. Now you'll notice that some of these arrows are dotted arrows, and some of them are solid arrows. So let's start with the GnRH. GnRH causes the release from the anterior pituitary gland of LH and FSH. GHIH and GHRH both interact to cause, so GHRH causes the release of GH, and GHIH inhibits the release of GH. Now the purpose of PIH is to inhibit the release of PRL, and then we have CRH, which causes the release of ACTH, and TRH, which causes the release of TSH. I'm going to go ahead and put the targets down here as well. And I think as I do this, I will go ahead and say the names. I think all the letters are probably mind-boggling. So GHRH and GHIH are growth hormone releasing hormone and growth hormone inhibiting hormone. And they both interact with the anterior pituitary gland to either cause the release of growth hormone or to inhibit the release of growth hormone. And perhaps you're thinking to yourself at this point, how can the hypothalamus release 2 neuropeptides with opposite purposes? And the answer to that is that the hypothalamus is not one structure. It's actually made of multiple nuclei, each of which has their own little purpose. So we oftentimes think of brain structures as these, one single set of neurons. That is not true. There are groups of neurons within there that are called nuclei, and each of the nuclei has its own purpose. So there's a nucleus basically that is in charge of releasing each of these different neuropeptides that we're looking at, including GHIH and GHRH, growth hormone inhibiting hormone and growth hormone releasing hormone. Now, growth hormone, you may have heard of it before. It is one of the better known hormones. It interacts, I'm just going to say that it interacts generally with different structures of the body. Growth hormone pretty much has effects on many, if not all, different cells of the body eventually. This next set is a little bit of a tongue twister. TRH is thyrotropin releasing hormone, which interacts with thyroid stimulating hormone. So TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone, is released as a neuropeptide from the hypothalamus. TSH, which is actually pretty well known, is thyroid stimulating hormone, which is released from the anterior pituitary gland, in the presence of TRH, of course. And then these go on to target the thyroid gland. CRH is corticotropin releasing hormone, which, when released from the hypothalamus and interacts in the anterior pituitary gland, causes a release of a very well-known hormone called ACTH, adrenocorticotropin hormone, ACTH. And this, in turn, moves from the anterior pituitary to interact in the adrenal cortex. I kind of ran out of room there, but if you do have room, go ahead and say adrenal cortex, because it matters, as you may have already realized. There's the adrenal cortex, which is made of glandular epithelium, and does things for the body, which we'll talk about. And then there's the adrenal medulla, which we already have talked about at length. It is the thing that that releases adrenaline. So the ACTH, to be clear, interacts with the adrenal cortex and not the adrenal medulla. Next, we have GnRH, which is I don't know if you're interested in knowing this, but it is a ubiquitous hormone. It's actually found in all kinds of animals. It's probably about 600 million years old, which is about how long animals have been on the earth. GnRH is used. It's a sexual behavior producing protein. GnRH is called gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. Very well known. Released by all kinds of animals. Generally speaking, it's going to be causing sexual behaviors of some kind. In the case of humans, it's going to cause the release of LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, both of which are involved in the creation of gametes and the creation of sex hormones such as testosterone and estrogen. Lastly, we have PIH, prolactin inhibiting hormone. When PIH is released from the hypothalamus and then interacts in the anterior pituitary gland, it inhibits the release of prolactin. You may have heard of prolactin before, and it's kind of right in the name. Prolactin causes lactation, so the target is breast tissue. So PIH, prolactin inhibiting hormone, is actually released on a continuous basis for most people because it's only in specific situations that you actually want your breasts to produce milk. So what happens when you want to start producing milk is that the PIH is no longer released from the hypothalamus, which enhances the production of PRL from the anterior pituitary gland because it's no longer being inhibited, and it is then entering into the bloodstream, going to the breast tissue, and allowing for the production of milk.